and welcome to the Unhinged History Podcast, the podcast where two friends compulsively read history memes and then learn the stories behind them and verbally assault their friend while recording it. I am assailant number one. I am Theresa.
I'm the accessory. I'm Angie.
And you have chosen to be violated.
And like it.
Yeah, pretty much. So
I
that's
mean,
all we
sorry, I keep
got.
coming
I mean,
back. Okay, bye.
exactly. Yeah, I know. Tell your therapist we said hi.
Hey, they're probably ours too.
Um,
Hold on, I'll see her Tuesday.
I know. Looking forward to seeing her. I want to jump right in. I have got a story that I have been sitting on and waiting to tell you
Why? Why have you been waiting?
because it is incredible. I won't tell you the article titles. I will tell
Okay.
you the main sources to give you a flavor, and we're going to move right along. Sound good?
Okay, hit me. Let's do this.
Sources thisdayinaviation.com, the Irish Sun, and the podcast Air Chats with Air Max.
That sounds fun.
Okay. So obviously we're talking about some sort of aeronautics or aviators or whatnot. 1941, in the middle of the Battle of Britain, Eric Moody is born.
Okay.
Which very auspicious start. He's raised in the south of Hampshire, England. He remembers watching dogfights as a little one, and by the age of 3, he tells his mother he wants to be a pilot.
Don't we all? Don't
Right?
we all?
Mm-hmm. By the age of 8, he meets captains of the British Overseas Airways Corporation and changes his mind. He wants to be a captain for the BAOC. And by the time he's 16, he starts to learn to fly. By 18, he earns an RAF scholarship due to some kind of program that the military had with his school. And in the scholarship, they give him 350 pounds. And this is in like 1959. And that buys him 30 hours of flight time.
Still not enough time.
No, not enough time, but like that is so much more than twice the amount of flight time that Catherine Sui Feng Chuin, I butchered that from episode 70 when you covered her, that she got. But he's
Yeah,
he's
that's true.
18. He gets his license to fly before he gets one to drive,
This checks. Okay.
right? So by the time he's turning to 18 or whatever, he's thinking of starting his career by joining the Air Force, but he decides to try to get into the College of Aviation instead. The training there starts in 1960, and he gets accepted within the first intake. So he's among the first cadets welcomed into this group. A couple weeks before he's ready to start attending class, he gets a letter regretting to inform him that he's medically unfit for service.
Ugh.
This devastates him.
I was
So he
just gonna say
starts
that's devastating.
Yeah, they don't necessarily list what's wrong, what's the medical defect they're disqualifying him for. So he does his best to start, uncovering what that is. He has a slightly deviated septum. So he
I'm
starts,
familiar.
okay, so you're aware of this. He starts going to a whole bunch of doctors, and trying to find one that would operate on him. Basically, nobody won't. He's too young. Your body changes, your nose keeps growing. Like not like your Pinocchio, but apparently. Um, one doc says if he waits until he's 21, the doctor might do surgery, but he should come back. On his 21st birthday, he shows back up at the doctor's office and says, "Hey, I'm here for surgery."
Put me
And
under, sock.
yeah, and the doc's like, "Okay, I didn't mean like day of, like, but I guess if you're super keen on it." And so his birthday's in June, and they decide to like push it out till October for surgery. So October, he has the surgery done. And for the next 18 months, he's feeling the effect of this surgery because it doesn't sound like it's an easy one.
Not back
Now,
then, I'm sure. I mean, it's
oh,
still
right.
uncomfortable today.
Yeah. So, unbeknownst to him, the BAOC, whom he chooses or wants to work for that and get involved in all this, they'd asked Cambridge that if they wanted a guaranteed 42 cadets, how many should they accept? And Cambridge replies with, well, you'll need to accept 50 because there's going to be people who can't pass all the exams. So the BAOC, they adopt this standard. Small problem. They didn't think about why Cambridge said to accept 50. It was because of the exams. Their qualifications meant before they could apply, they needed to already have had the exams done. So they accepted 50 qualified candidates, and now they have to weed out 8.
Okay.
So our boy Eric gets disqualified for giggles just because they overfilled the seats, which feels like a solid plane reference.
Dick move. You're
Right.
right, it does. We'll have to put you on to a later flight.
Yep. He later admits that he figures out that another cadet was dismissed because of ingrown toenails. But again, they're just trying to come up with any
Okay.
reason, right? So this is like the level of petty they have to go to get to their 42. So in August of 1962, he contacts the BOAC to reapply because he's had the surgery now. And him and his girlfriend at the time, now wife, head to Heathrow Airport to get a medical screening. And the doctor who meets him is notoriously foul-mouthed. And I quote, he could put 15 F words in a 17-word sentence and it would make sense.
Karl Urban looking at you.
I mean, I deeply respect this level of communication. He's swearing at his notes that when he looks at Moody's charts and he asks Moody, why is he here? And Moody explains that he's had the surgery to get here. This is the road he took. The doctor flies into a rage. The doctor's nose is so much worse than Moody's, and the doctor was allowed in. The doctor knew that Moody is dedicated and really wanted to be a pilot. So the doctor just storms out of the room, comes back later with a piece of paper saying that Moody's medically fit and to piss off. He's never looked at his nose.
Okay.
So Moody waits 2 years and gets a letter from the BAOC expressing their sorrow. They're full. They're not accepting new cadets or new cadets for the time being. Small consolation. They're giving him a job with the BEA, which is a short haul piloting gig. Now the BAOC, they're like long term, like you're gone for a week, you come back, you slack off for a week and then you go back in. That's what he really wants. But like he referred to the BEA as the back every afternoon, and he wasn't too thrilled about that concept.
Okay.
Um, so he's like,
Is this
okay,
because he
fine.
wants to have a family in a different zip code too?
I mean, we don't get into his motivation for wanting to like peace out for, a week at a time, but these are things. So it's 1963. He's on the verge of getting married to the same girlfriend that escorted him to the doctor's office to meet Mr. I swear a lot. And in the process of, going through and preparing for his marriage stuff, he sees an advertisement in an aviation magazine that is seeking pilots for the BAOC. And he writes a terse letter. He goes, look, you a-holes, like I have been trying my darndest to get in there. And you tell me that you don't have room and that you won't have room for the foreseeable future. But now there's a full-on, full-page color ad. And now what am I supposed to do? And they respond with, ooh, we're super sorry, but you work for the BEA and we have like a no poaching agreement and we can't proselytize. Sucks to be you.
What is their beef with this guy? Is it the
I don't know.
nose?
It must be like he's not pretty enough for what they're hoping for, doesn't, like match the color scheme. I don't know what it is. They go back and forth. Eventually he wears him down. He gets his dream job.
Good for him. Way to be the squeaky wheel.
Yep. He starts flying VC-10s, and this required a lot of manual navigation work, like with a sextant, the whole like looking at the stars, the whole 9 yards to get to where he needs to go. And he works on the VC-10s until 1970 when the jumbo jets start coming along. Nobody else wanted to fly these planes. The more experienced pilots, they were very set in their ways. They knew what they wanted to do. And so he raises his hand. Now the crews that start making up these flights are very junior and they don't have a lot of competition. And so they all have easy access getting on board this. And in an interview that Moody did on the Air Chats podcast, he explains that during the time in the early years of flying jumbo jets, a lot goes wrong. The engines aren't very good. He makes the statement, if you could do a trip without an engine failure, you're doing pretty well.
The standards are so low.
Yeah, I was not comforted by that statement. Now,
Yeah.
the engines are built so poorly, they constantly break down and they don't have a strong climb rate. And I say this like I study aeronautics and I understand any of those words and how they work in conjunction. Like I have no idea. But during those 6 years, he experiences 23 engine failures, 18 of which are catastrophic. Like
Oh,
bang, dunzo, goodbye.
bye-bye.
He enjoys it. He
Of
finds this
course.
exciting and a great learning experience. Now it's
Weirdo.
1975. He takes command of a VC-10 for 4 years, basically running the whole show. And then he advances his career to get back on a 200 jumbo jet in 1980. So he is
Okay.
like climbing the ladder, doing his thing. So now we're going to fast forward to June 24th, 1982. British Airways Flight 9 en route from London, England to Auckland, New Zealand. They're cruising at 3,700 feet or 37,000 feet. They've got 248 passengers and 15 crew members.
Okay.
So normally the flight crew changes every leg of the trip. Like if you land for a defrosting or whatever it is,
Refueling or
refueling,
whatever.
whatever it is. But this crew remained together. So they'd gone from London to Bahrain to Auckland, and they're, or that's what they're going to do is to go to Auckland. And Moody describes that this kind of gave them a very cohesive crew-like feeling.
I would think
Now,
so.
there'd been 16 cabin crew members, but three of them fall ill. And so he decides to go light on the cabin crew and let these three stay behind and kind of chillax because they are having some Montezuma's Revenge, but the other international version that you can have, which does not seem like a fun thing on a limited potty plane.
Okay.
So as he's thinking about it, he goes, this will be fine. There's 12 doors on the jumbo jet. I've got 13 cabin crew. Feels like enough. Worst case scenario, we're good. He
Okay.
also doesn't have a full plane, so he orchestrates moving all 248 passengers to the lower level to make it easier on the crew for everyone to manage. So they all plan to complete another leg of this journey just running light. Now,
Does moving your
dur-
passengers affect aerodynamics in a way that's counter beneficial here?
I don't think so.
Okay.
None of that is mentioned. I think this is all just to give the crew an easier time because they're going to be running a
Okay.
little light. Um, but this does cause a little bit of delay. And so they're about 30 minutes late leaving than they would have planned.
Okay.
Now, the weather forecast declares it's going to be a great night for flying. No weather that they would be afraid of running into. It's a fairly moonless night, so this is fine. Typically, he does crosswords during these long flights. So he is just prepared to get in, settle down, do his thing. Um, as they're flying over Java, he takes a look at his instruments and he's like, you know what? Things look fine. I'm going to go to the bathroom. So he goes to the closest bathroom. It's occupied. And since it's in use, he chats with a flight attendant. And the flight attendant explains that the mood of the plane is very subdued. Everyone is basically sleeping. They've flown, from mostly from London. They're now in Java, so they're pretty close, to Auckland. Um, everybody, mostly, there's about 100 Kiwis and Aussies. They've been together on a tour. They're drinking it up, but it's fine. It's nothing the flight attendants can't handle. So he's like, okay, no big. He's walking back to the flight deck and he describes smelling smoke. Now it's 1980,
Okay.
and this isn't the legal cigarette smoke that's allowed on planes at the time. It's a more of an acrid electrical smoke smell, the
Okay.
kind of smell you don't want on a plane.
Mm-hmm.
And he anticipates being told that there might be a small electronical fire once he gets back to the flight deck. Like he's like, okay, this is what I'm about to hear. In the cockpit, things are a little different. The crew is mesmerized by the St. Elmo's fire dancing on the windscreen.
Oh,
Are you familiar with St. Elmo's fire?
correct me if I'm wrong, but St. Elmo's fire is fire that burns so hot you can't fully see it in certain lighting, right?
Um, you say that, and that might be a different definition of the same thing. So I don't want to discount it, but I also don't want to pretend like I know what the hell I'm talking about. Um, the way they describe it is a weather phenomenon that happens in conjunction with many other things. Um, and basically on the windscreen, it's normally like these brief little flashes of light. But the way that they're looking at it, it's larger lightning bolts that are dancing across the windscreen, and it's full on rainbow color spectrum.
Okay.
So it's very different than what they're normally used to experiencing, but it's not typically something that is any cause for concern.
Yeah, okay.
But it's just one of
It's
those, hey, neat.
and we're all totally enjoying this electrical storm we're flying through.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So 10:42 p.m. local time, approximately 110 miles south of Jakarta, the flight engineer in training says that the number 4 engine has failed. Now, this isn't a normal engine
Hmm.
failure. He's had 23 engine failures, right? So he should be pretty good at this. He's listening to his engineer say this, and he has to like really pay attention to like identify that this guy's not making it up, because it's at that point that he hears it. He realizes the engine is winding down. And that's when the plane starts to yaw on its side in response to 2 inches on one side working and only one on the other. And then
Hmm.
they realize that engine 4 is on fire.
This cannot bode well.
So they start the
But you got
basic,
like 100 Aussies on there, so I feel good for
right?
them.
Yeah. Like there's probably a couple good drinking songs going.
Yeah.
Um, so they start the procedures to shut it down. They're just going textbook, right? Within 30 seconds, engines 1, 2, and 3 fail as well.
So four failed
Four
engines.
out of four.
That's
4 out of 4.
folks say that's all of them. Okay.
Yeah. That's all, folks. Do. Um, it's at this point, Moody says, under stress, one's vocabulary becomes quite limited. And I'm like, me
Got it.
too. Me too, friend. Me too. And so Eric Moody is now flying what is described as the world's heaviest glider with over 250 people when you consider the passengers and crew. And this earns him a spot in the Guinness World Record. It's not one you want. It's not one you want.
Okay.
Um, Now, I'll circle back on that later if I remember to, so remind me. So he's stuck basically in pitch black. It's basically moonless. And he is thankful that he remembered being trained for a 4 engine failure once every 2 years.
Oh, okay. So
Now,
there's something you can do about this.
yeah, and he's gone through the simulation once every occasion, you
It's
know?
2 years. Okay.
Yeah. Um, Unfortunately, the training he had was wrong because he'd been told that if all 4 engines fail, the power would fail as well. And that means the autopilot would quit. And in the simulation, this loud blazing klaxon would just be deafening. But the autopilot stays working, the klaxon doesn't sound. And he looks over at the board and he sees a total electrical failure from all the lights on the dashboard. So he does what he thinks is the smartest move and he turns off the airway to avoid collision. Basically, if you've got no brakes, get out of the way of traffic.
So he put his blinker and his hazard lights on.
Pretty much. Yeah. And so he's
Okay.
just going to coast this as much as he can. Now, he knows at 37,000 feet, he's got some time before he crashes because he's descending at 17 to 1800 feet per minute. So 20-ish minutes till a belly flop.
Woo.
Now, he
I'm
just,
assuming in the ocean because
yes,
we've just flown
yes,
over Jakarta. Okay.
yeah. He describes being cross because he realizes he's on the cusp of his 41st, he's on the cusp of his 41st birthday, and he doesn't want to die at age 40, which feels so bloody English.
It does. This is not how I planned to go. Hmm.
Yeah. Now, Rolls-Royce, who made the motors, they had said that there's no reason to try starting these planes above 29,000 feet because there's so little oxygen that the engines won't have the capacity to get going. But during his training, they were taught ignore that, start the procedures immediately, and try to work through as many as you can, many chances to get that plane up and going. So they
Okay.
hit 30,000 feet, nothing happens. Now in the simulators, you hit 30,000 feet, you start the protocol, and everything starts up like magic. And it's at this point he realizes they've only been trying to start 3 engines. They've been ignoring engine 4. That first one that went out because it was on fire.
Just seems like something you would ignore.
Yeah, and to be fair, that's what he was trained to do, was to ignore it completely. Um, So he's like, okay, he's thinking about it and he has that aha moment. Now they're in a mountainous space around Java, and he knows that the peaks in this area start about 10,000 feet. And so he feels that 12,000 feet is safe. And it's safe to glide if he can't restart the engines. And then he can try to do a water landing, and he knows that's not going to be successful, but it's like the best he can do. So he knows he needs to get ahead of his chief steward, and the intercom system that he would normally use is broken. So he gets on the PA and he says the following: Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have a small problem. All 4 engines have stopped, and we're doing our damnedest to get them going again. I trust you're not in too much distress. Would the chief stewardess please come to the flight deck?
If that's not the most British English thing I have ever heard in my life,
Yeah.
I
Isn't that
trust you're
just,
not panicking.
yeah. Now, according to him, that last statement with the chief stewardess, please come to the flight deck, that is the phrase that you need to be prepared for as a passenger, because that last statement is a cue for the staff to start preparing for a crash landing. Start securing everything you can. We want the least amount of projectiles. It's about to get rough.
Gotcha.
So they go back to start trying to restart all 4 of those engines. And the first engine to restart is engine 4, the first one to go, the one that caught on fire, the one they'd been
Okay.
trained to ignore. It restarts at 13,500 feet.
Whew.
So within the next 2, 3 minutes, all of the engines have restarted. Now they're not operating as powerfully as they should, but they're running. And they'd only been
Okay.
gliding for 15, 16 minutes, right? So 4 minutes from belly flop,
Let's cut it close.
right?
Okay.
Now, it's around this time that they connect with an airport in Java, and air traffic control requests they climb back up to 13,000 feet because they've kind of come down a little bit so they can show up on the radar. And that's when the St. Elmo's fire starts back up, and the engines start to surge again, as well as engine number 2 shooting a flame out by the captain's ear and creating a very loud booming sound, which rocks the airplane. So he decides to descend a little bit lower, and he decides that maybe 13.5 isn't where he wants to be because that's another engine failure, and he's experienced 5 within the last several minutes. So he's kind of over it.
We're done. Yeah.
Yeah. Now they start to experience another issue. As they start to fly towards Jakarta for their emergency landing, they realize the windscreens are opaque.
This can't be good.
There is only a 2-inch wide strip on one side with any visibility, and the entire team is monitoring all instruments extremely carefully. Now, remember, he started flying his career on planes where he was needing to use a sextant and be very intentional about
Hands
all of his
on.
movements, which I feel is very important for this whole thing. He says they gently landed the plane. Moody says it was such a beautiful landing that the plane kissed the ground. Now they get down. Everybody's on solid ground. They still have no idea what happened. And when they get off the plane, they said parts of it looked like it had been sandblasted.
Oh.
Now, an Air France pilot is the one who walks over once they landed and told Moody he'd flown through a volcanic eruption. In
Oh.
hindsight, he learns that the volcano had been erupting since April. It's June.
And
There'd been,
wow.
go ahead.
Okay. No, you'd think that would be weather worth mentioning.
Well, it doesn't show up on the radar because the weather systems that we have in place measure moisture in the atmosphere. This is the opposite of moisture.
Right. Okay. Okay.
So there'd been no warnings that he needed to avoid this eruption. And if the plane been on time and not delayed that 30 minutes, he'd have missed the plume he flew through. Now, it takes 2 days to confirm that they flew over volcanic eruption, and the volcanic ash caused the engine failures and the thick dust that was triggering the St. Elmo's fire.
That is insane.
Yeah. The plane was repaired and flown back to London, where it underwent further and more extensive repairs. Captain Moody and Senior Cabin Services Officer Graham Skinner were awarded the Queen's Commendation for valuable services in the Air Guinness Book of Records lists Flight 9 as the longest glide of any aircraft not designed for gliding. They only held this
So it's
record
the
for a
thing.
year when
Because
another
Moody did it
plane did
again
it.
the next
No,
year.
it wasn't Moody. It wasn't Moody. Thank God it wasn't Moody. Um, Captain Eric Moody died age 84 at his home in the UK during the week of March 21st, 2024,
So like
just a couple months ago, like literally like
that's
last quarter. Now, when he's reflecting on these incredible events, like, before he passed, obviously, he mused, when I learned to fly in the 50s, flying was dangerous and sex was safe. When I retired in the 90s, it had gone the other way round.
wow. I need to know so much about St. Elmo's fire now.
But yeah,
What a dude.
hmm
And his deviated septum never stopped him. Look at that.
never stopped him.
That is wild.
And like, I,
Absolutely
s-
wild.
I was somebody, a friend of the podcast, shared this story with me on TikTok, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have to cover it." But there was like an interview with him on like a talk show, British talk show, and they had asked him, was it difficult? And he had made the comment, I'm about to butcher it, but it was like he had said something along the lines of, "It was like trying to navigate up a badger's ass."
I really, really wish he was still alive and would adopt us because his metaphors are peak like yours.
Yeah, 10 out of 10, no notes.
Perfection. Holy beans. Thank you for that. You've just made my day.
I do what I can, and because it was just
You
like,
know,
oh, I needed all of this.
every word of it was just I was wondering where we were gonna go,
hmm
and that's not where I thought we were gonna go. I'm just
Where did
I'm
you think
just
I
gonna
was
say it.
going?
Uh, Drug running. I thought we were gonna
Oh,
end with
what,
cocaine.
you thought I was doing Cocaine Bear?
Maybe not necessarily cocaine bear, but something about cocaine, you
Okay.
know?
I I'll come correct next time.
No, your story was much better than where I thought we were headed. The DEA will not be knocking down our doors
Not for
today.
this.
Nope, yes, not for this, but that pound of cocaine in the trunk that I'm not sure about because we both have the fear of being pulled
Kilos.
over.
Kilos. It's measured in
Yeah,
kilos, Angie.
I
You're
know,
doing
I
it wrong.
know.
Quit being so bloody American.
Sorry. You know, the funny thing is outside of this conversation, I only refer to cocaine in kilos, which
That's
is a
fair.
weird. I have no business knowing anything about cocaine, but yet here we are. It's because we're American women. I think that's why we're white ladies.
Yeah, it's
I
white
think that's
girls.
why.
Yeah, white women ain't scared of anything, and we only measure cocaine in kilos.
Yeah, while saving the animal in our leggings and flip-flops because
Yeah, pretty
here we go.
much. Yep.
I think that covers it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, you know what? You've closed out the documentary. David Attenborough, we're here. Wrap. We're done.
Sign us up. Closed. Man, I legit don't know how to segue from your story to my story.
You
Oh,
need a minute? Do you need to like go like verbally throw up on Hubs? Not on my Hubs, on the man, and then be like, okay, I can come back now that I have like purged,
cleansed myself.
centered.
I will tell you that I did verbally throw up all over him last night, over my notes, because I was so like, "Oh, what?
What?
How? How does this happen?" And so I had to tell him the whole story from beginning to end, and he was like, "Didn't see that coming, did you?"
I mean,
Oh,
yeah, and that sounds like you're going to bury the lead to me, like I buried the lead on you.
no, I'll just get right into it. I feel like just getting right into it is my best bet. There's no way to segue from Cocaine Bear to this.
All right.
Okay, my sources are the Georgia Encyclopedia, the American Revolution Experience, my one of my favorite sources, battlefields.org, NPR, the National Park Service, who really should consider sponsoring us
I
because
mean, honestly, national parks, I think we can be bought for just annual passes. I'm just going to float that out
truly,
there.
I, honestly, you're not wrong.
Come do vocal ads on the glory of Yosemite, the
We're here
majesty
for it.
of Glacier National Park. Or,
And occasionally hit us with your weird information too.
yeah, like come talk to us about, the glory of Fort Vancouver. We're here for it.
How many Sasquatches are actually found every year, like sighted every year?
Right. Like, you know what? We'll let you have a segment.
We're here for it.
Reach
Hear
out.
that, National Park Services? Um, AmericanHeritage.com, ConstitutingAmerica.org, which is an amazing website if you ever get a moment and have some need to learn about American history. That's a great place to go. The Gwinnett County website, and I'm just gonna say this,
Where is Gwinnett County?
it's in Georgia.
Okay.
I was telling my son that one of my favorite things about podcasting, and you can attest to this, is that your main story always ends up with 152 things that are only marginally related, but you have to know.
hmm hmm
Like,
And
right,
you have to
okay.
you have to side quest.
You have to side quest. And he said that that's not a me problem, that that's not a podcast problem, that's a me problem because I have to know. But I feel like he's wrong. Like, we have to know.
I'm not a good sample size for this because you and I are too closely from the same, at least bolt of fabric.
Cloth?
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
I
um
agree.
we get along because my crazy plays well with your crazy, so I cannot confirm or deny because it's just confirmation bias.
True. I told him he was wrong. So, I mean, at the end of the
You know
day,
what?
he's
He's
wrong.
wrong and he's grounded.
For 15 years, at least. And then I'll forget why, and here we'll start all
Yeah,
over
and then it'll be
again.
done.
Right. So I also had to look up the history of the US laws against dueling. So there's that.
I I approve of this.
You're welcome. And the Atlantic Journal-Constitution newspaper. It was an article written by Bo Emerson, December 13th of 2012. I am telling you this story because we just celebrated the 4th of July. So I thought we
Hmm.
could go for a little American history. Um, that being said, I think I asked you this the other day, but are you a fan of the show Elementary starring Lucy Liu?
You did ask, and I have not even looked it up.
Right. Okay, so that's where I that was my sort that was my inspiration. I needed to know more once they talked about this individual. So I thought I would pick one of the lesser known signers of the Declaration of Independence. How much do you know about the signers of the Declaration of Independence?
I've got a full, like, I'm going to move that bookshelf and it's going to be nothing but like a map with a bunch of like post-it notes and string. And it's going to,
Okay,
yeah,
Nick Cage.
I know nothing.
Perfect. That's great because I thought I knew something until I got here and I knew absolutely nothing, and I'm delighted to have learned a thing or two.
I'm about to say, like, you
So,
remember that I like got excited when I realized that a good chunk of the signers were just a bunch of smugglers who were upset that the English was bringing in legal tea cheaper than their smuggled goods.
here we are.
Yeah, that's my level of
Yeah.
knowledge.
All right. Okay. So, same. Okay. So, here we are. So, I'm going to tell you the story of a Georgian by the name of Button Gwinnett. If you're curious how you end up with a name like Button and almost deserve it, he's named for his godmother, Barbara Button.
I thought
And
he
I'm
just
just going
had
to
the
say,
cutest little nose. His nose just looked like a butt. He's
it's a
cute
little
as a button.
button. I just gotta say, somebody has to really love Godmother Barbara Button to like willingly say, "Yep, I'm gonna name my child after that." That's gonna be the name they carry their whole life is gonna be Button. But this is also the time when people were named like Patience and things like that. So
You're not wrong. And we name our kids weird things now. Like, let's be
y-
honest.
that's true.
You know,
Apple, looking at you, Gwyneth Paltrow.
right?
Yeah. So Button Gwinnett. He is born in April of 1734, according to the New Georgia Encyclopedia. He's born in Down Hatherley, Gloucestershire, England. His parents are Anne and the Reverend Samuel Gwinnett. It's possible he had at least 6 siblings. It makes sense Gwinnett would have attended the King's School in Gloucestershire. However, no documents survive to confirm that, but he was also taught about trade and finance from an uncle who was a merchant in Bristol. So it's 1757. He's 23 years old. Gwinnett moves to Wolverhampton, Staffordshire, which, if you're curious, is about 61 miles north of his childhood home.
So he
Now,
traveled
it
pretty far,
is,
all things considered, because that's like,
yeah,
a week away.
yeah, 61 miles, right? It is worth noting, I didn't use Wikipedia as a source, but I did look him up on Wikipedia. Wikipedia says he moved to this area around 1754 and also got a second apprenticeship with an ironmonger called John Weston
We don't
Smith.
use monger
Um,
enough, whether it's warmonger, fishmonger, ironmonger. We more mongers.
I'm gonna be honest, that's why I included the note because it said ironmonger, and I thought the same thing. I was like, this is a word we need to bring back. Um, But because his life is more obscure than most of the other signers, it's hard to say if that's actually true. What we do know is that this is where he marries a young lady called Anne Bourne and goes into business with his father-in-law, who's a greengrocer.
Okay.
Now, he stays in business with him at least for a short time. And about this time, his wife would give him the first of 3 daughters called Amelia. So it's 1758 when Amelia is born. He would have a total of 3 children, Amelia, Anne, and Elizabeth Ann. And I'm just gonna say, naming your third child the middle name of your second child, I have follow-up questions, but there's no one to
You
ask
know
them
what?
to.
Here's the deal. Because you look at like Marie Laveau's family, every kid's first name was Marie.
Yeah,
Marie.
just like Maria Therese, yeah, they're all
They're all Marie. That's
Yeah.
like you go to my family's house and you say, "Hey, Bubba," and three people and a dog bark. Well, the people don't bark, but the people are like, "Yeah,
The people bark and the dog's like, what up?
oh, you had
So,
something? You got treats?"
exactly. I like treats. Um, Around 1759, excuse me, around 1759, Gwinnett enters the export shipping business and builds up a pretty extensive trade game with the American colonies. It's looking pretty good for him. By 1765, he decides to make the move to the colonies. Now, according to Constituting America, he had quite the journey to get here. He lived briefly in Nova Scotia, then Jamaica, and then he made his way to Savannah, Georgia, where his family would eventually join him. Constituting America also says that he may have made the decision to move to the colonies to escape his creditors back in merry old England.
Look, we all do
Most
things for reasons.
Right. But here's the thing. Most of his business ventures were not successful or constantly profitable. So I kind of have to tend to agree with that. Like he was not great. He was actually a spectacular failure at business. Um, Again, his plan in Savannah was not that glittering success he was hoping for, so he does the most logical thing and he buys a huge tract of land on St. Catherine's Island, which is just off the coast of Georgia, because he is evidently totally dazzled with the idea of planter life.
Let me pause this real quick because we just said like Broski, history of failed business ventures, leaves his
Truly.
creditors, and then buys basically an island. With
Hmm.
what? With what?
On
Because
credit.
the rest of us are like poorer than a joke. And it's like, what are we supposed to do? But like here he is, high cheekbones, the name of Button, and he just turns around and buys it off of the name Button.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly what happened. Creditors. Because his
I
name's Button.
I've really got to rethink, my gender identity and maybe becoming a male because I recognize that this is a common theme in history, and quite frankly, I'm feeling left out. And I think like
Truly, right?
letting my chin hair grow and adopting a deeper voice would be advantageous.
I mean, at least in the financial world, the hubs might not agree.
You know what? For the money, he'll deal.
He will just have to handle it.
He'll wipe his tears with $100 bills, and I'm okay with this.
I cannot wait to be your house something. Can I be your vacuumer? Oh, you have a
Sure.
vacuum for that. Whatever. Anyway,
You know what? I don't like doing it. So if you'll do it, that's great. Perfect.
I
Moving
love
right
to
along.
vacuum. Right then. Okay. So as I said before, finance is not his strong suit, and he's super in debt again. But he's got land and, unfortunately, slaves. However, by
Hmm.
1773, both his lands and slaves are all taken back by his creditors. However, they do allow him to keep his home, which he keeps
Is
for
that
the
just
remainder of his
because they
life.
couldn't carry it away? It wasn't
Unclear?
nailed down, or it was nailed down?
I don't know if it was because it wasn't nailed down or because for whatever reason he is still a respectable gentleman in society that they're like, well, we're not going to take your house. Out of the goodness of their heart, unclear.
All right.
Now, while he was, like just a spectacular failure in business, he did all right in politics, and he pretty quick becomes a leader within a faction of people that want to take control from the elites in Christchurch Parish as well as the British. So here's the thing. He kind of a zealot, really wants to be governing himself, like they want to govern themselves, and he is with this group. The
Hmm.
folks over in Christchurch Parish are more conservative and more I don't want to say that they didn't have a problem with the British, but they tried to deal with it a little bit differently than just being an outright like zealot about it.
Right.
So all that to be said, did you know that Georgia was one of the 13 colonies was the last to be organized by the British?
I Didn't.
Neither did I. But basically, in Georgia, the entire white population is kind of centered on the coast.
Okay.
So
So
those
inland is
parishes,
the Native Americans?
well, inland is just not very colonized yet.
Okay.
So there's definitely native tribes there. We've got like what do we have? The Cherokee, the Choctaw. We've got already people that have lived there for a millennia, right?
Right.
Um, there are some parishes inland and not many. They're backwoods, they're rural, the whole bit. It doesn't take long for Gwinnett to become an outspoken leader amongst these colonists from, say, St. John's Parish. He basically goes on the platform saying he speaks for all the common people of Georgia, not
Oh,
those
one of
elitists
these
over there.
guys.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
It is also worth mentioning that despite his bad business, Gwinnett remains a well-respected member of the community, and with that was made a justice of the peace. The colonists eventually elect him to the General Georgia Assembly, where Gwinnett served from 1769 to 1771. Not
I,
great at business, but somehow is a good talker.
but like, okay, I'm not saying if you're a good businessman, you're going to be a great police officer. I don't think those two correlate. I don't want to conflate those two. But it's like, oh, you're bad at business? Peace officer. And then we're going to put you into this role of power. Like, what?
Yeah, I'm thinking those were just wild times back then. That's all I can think of.
Okay.
So, during his first term in office, Gwinnett advocated for parishes that had taxes imposed on them without legislative representation, and he also becomes an opponent of the British royal governor. So, like, he's making a name for himself. He's definitely getting out there. He definitely has things to say. He basically blames all of his troubles and all of the troubles for the other Georgians on the elites in Christchurch's parish. Has nothing to do with the fact that he just sucks at business. It's their fault.
And it was their fault back in England too. It was their
Of
fault.
course. Yes, of course. So it's pretty clear that there's some division amongst the different factions. And as such, Georgia doesn't send a delegation to the First Continental Congress. I didn't know that. But I thought like everybody showed up. So that was news to me. The St. John's Parish representatives also boycott the first provincial congress, but later they hold a second provincial congress in July of 1775, which was attended by all. However, missing from that, excuse me, by all the groups, but missing from that party was our boy Gwinnett. He's out forging an alliance between his supporters in St. John's Parish and all the new recruits from like the western, more rural areas of Georgia. When the Continental Congress declared that Georgia should raise a battalion, because, we're gonna go to
Right.
war now, we need a battalion, the colonial legislator chooses Gwinnett as the commander, despite the fact that he has absolutely no military qualifications. Like none.
So hold on, I gotta talk to my doctor about this change that I'm about to do because I'm becoming more and more committed.
Right? I mean, it's absurd. Like,
My name is
absolutely no
Terry.
military. They call me Glenn. Oh my gosh. So, I also want to take this moment to just point out that he is actually a little late to the party as far as becoming a patriot goes. Now, while he's got a beef with Christchurch and he's got a beef with the royal governor, he still has some love for his birth country as well as the fact that he maintains close family connections in England. But that doesn't stop him because he does eventually join, and on August 2nd, 1776, along with two other Georgians by the name of Linman Hall and George Walton,
You
he
said
signs the
Lemon? Lemon
Declaration.
Hall?
Linman, Lyman.
Okay, I was like Lemon Hall. That sounds like either a like dessert shop or I was like, we've got Button and Lemon coming down the but
Right down the line.
all right.
Along with two other Georgians, Linman Hall and George Walton, he signs the Declaration of Independence. Gwinnett was only one of 8 signers who was actually born abroad.
That's a low number.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be significantly higher. When I read that, I was like, excuse me? No.
Like, I'm not going to become a birther and go around and start asking for everybody's birth certificate, but
Yeah. Sadly, Gwinnett never actually got to command anything in the Continental Battalion because he ended up more useful in drafting Georgia's first constitution and serving at the Second Continental Congress.
I thought you were going to say because he like got some other bizarrely good raise. And you're like, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. When he returned to Georgia, he was hoping to get his battalion back, but instead it went to George Lachlan McIntosh.
You say
Excuse
that
me,
like I'm going to know who that is.
I said it wrong. General Lachlan McIntosh. After passage of the Constitution of 1777, Gwinnett begins to purge the military of officers whom he and his followers deemed less zealous for their cause, and this brings him in direct conflict with Lachlan. So he's basically butthurt that he doesn't have the job he wants, the job that he is absolutely not qualified to have.
But see, the problem is up until this point, qualifications are beyond this.
Truly,
They're a secondary issue.
truly, until someone thought, oh, McIntosh actually has experience.
Is
So,
that important?
I mean, I guess if you're going to wage a war, it's probably important. Now, after the death of Georgia's president and their commander-in-chief by the name of Archibald Bullock, which I think
Georgia's
cannot be a
president?
real name. Yes, most states had their own president before we had a conjoined constitution or
Okay.
some sort of commander-in-chief. Wild information, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm meeting my country for the first time. Like, hello, your name is
America?
Mirica?
How do you pronounce that? Did I put the I in the right place?
Do you say each A the same? Like, what are we playing with?
No, of course you don't say any of the matching letters the same. That's not how English works, Theresa. So anyway, Bullock dies, and in February 1777, the Council of Safety appoints Gwinnett to succeed him. So now he's the commander-in-chief of Georgia. It's worth noting that the only opposing vote comes from one George McIntosh, the brother of General Lachlan McIntosh. So, if you can't see it already, there's a bit of a storm brewing between these two families, and the McIntoshes and the Gwinnett's just can't be friends. Across the board, they just can't do it. Long story short, Gwinnett still really wants to see some military action, and he tries to urge the Continental Army to send an expedition to attack the British troops and sympathizers that are in St. Augustine, Florida, because that has anything to do with Georgia's safety. But here you are. These ideas, they are totally ignored and or rejected.
What? But he
I
has no
know.
experience and he's in charge. Shouldn't
It's
he have that
wild, right?
capacity?
Shouldn't he be able to just launch a military expedition?
But Angie, he's commander in chief,
I don't make the rules. I didn't write the Constitution. I would have let him try to wage the war, let's be honest.
but by himself in just his
Exactly.
skivvies and some rain boots.
And like a plastic knife. Good luck, friend. You're going to Florida. I
Go
wish you
with
the
God,
best of luck.
right if you can work.
Exactly. Exactly. So, because the Continental Army has said no, thank you, we pass on this, Gwinnett then tries to get the Georgia Battalion to take action. However, he's met with some resistance because, McIntosh is the leader.
Why doesn't he just engage in a good old-fashioned bar fight and get it out of his system?
I just wish he would, but he'd probably get promoted to tavern keep at that point, right? Like McIntosh thought the Georgian forces were ill prepared to mount any sort of operation in his territory, and it's far from their source of food and supplies. So he is like, this is a terrible idea. Let's don't do
Yeah,
this.
like an army marches on its stomach.
Right. Eventually, an attempt does occur, um, but it's full stop abandoned before the troops are more than a few miles outside of their base.
So they walk around the block and they're like, but it's raining.
I didn't pack enough granola bars. I'm going home. Yeah,
I have
okay.
thoughts.
Same. So Gwinnett's feud with Mackintosh only gets worse from here. He receives a packet of documents in March of 1777. These documents say that George Mackintosh, remember Lachlan's brother who voted
Yeah.
against him, has entered into a business partnership with his brothers-in-law to ship rice from Dutch Guinea to the British
So
West
hold
Indies.
on, because we're talking about a bunch of dudes. Macintosh is in cahoots with Macintosh's brothers-in-law or Gwinnett's.
The way I understand it, Gwinnett's brother-in-law.
Okay, so the Macintoshes and the Button adjacent, they're in cahoots and leaving Gwinnett out.
This is how it appears.
Okay.
Um, so despite the fact that like this probably ticks Gwinnett off anyways, the problem with it is this shipment took place before independence was declared, but it was still a violation of the Continental Association prohibition of trade with British ports.
So now
So
he's got
he's
a
got to
rat on
beef
his
with it
own
anyway,
brother.
essentially, right?
Oh, I can't wait for Thanksgiving.
And what he does instead is arrest George, or has George McIntosh, or rather, George McIntosh is arrested. He's he's later released on bail, paid for in part by members of the Council of Safety, which I gotta say is probably pretty harsh and a need for some aloe because the Council of Safety is originally what voted and elected Gwinnett to be the commander in chief of Georgia.
That came with a solid note of simmer down now.
Yeah, it sure did. By early May, the first assembly under the new constitution meets to elect their first actual governor. Like, Gwinnett became the commander in chief because the other guy died, but now we're actually hosting an election so that we can, do this the right way, right?
Right.
Gwinnett goes into this thinking he's going to be chosen, but instead, the legislature selects another member of the Popular Party, a fellow by the name of John Adam Treutelin. I'm going to say this wrong every time. Treutlen. I have tried to pronounce this 100 times and just cannot do it.
I would probably say it just a different
Treutelin?
way every single time.
Treutelin is what makes the most sense to me, but I still don't think that's right. I probably could have found a video with his name in it, but it seems so obscure that I... Anyway. To Gwinnett's credit, the legislator also reports findings of an investigation that went into the whole St. Augustine, Florida thing. This investigation upholds Gwinnett's position and implicitly rejected the stance taken by General McIntosh. So,
Wait a minute. So the
yeah, the
logic train missed
legislator,
the stop and they just kind of went along to Crazyville?
yeah, they sure did, but it's a little late now because this is the post, this is an like post the event, this is the investigation, these are the results of the investigation. However, this thoroughly pisses McIntosh off, and he takes to the floor of the assembly and he says that Gwinnett is, quote, a scoundrel and a lying rascal. Gwinnett
Lying
clutches his
rascal.
pearls. A lying
Rascal.
rascal. Mm-hmm.
This is like when my grandmother called me a Jezebel, and I was just like, look at you slinging mud. That's adorable.
That's so cute, right? I wouldn't even be mad. I'd be like, and carry on. Well, Gwinnett's pissed. He clutches his pearls. He goes back home, and on May 15, 1777, he puts out a written challenge to duel Mackintosh the next day. By the way, if you're counting, dueling has been outlawed for 2 years at this point.
Has or
But that
has
doesn't
not?
stop people. Has been.
Okay.
Dueling was outlawed under the 69 Articles of War, which Congress passed in 75, that basically governed the Continental Army during the Revolution. So,
They're
like,
like, look, we're busy enough. Would you quit poking yourself with sharp sticks?
Please stop it. Yeah, that's essentially the gist. But I digress. The following morning, standing only about 12 feet apart, Gwinnett and Mackintosh fire at one another. Both men aim and both men hit their target. And because Gwinnett is such a spectacular failure at things, he doesn't manage anything but a flesh wound to Mackintosh's thigh. However, Mackintosh, his shot shattered the bone just above Gwinnett's knee.
Mm.
They're both on the ground. Mackintosh asks if both parties could reload and fire again
Oh,
because
he
he
put
just
on
has a
his
real
big
beef
boy
with this dude.
pants.
He sure did. Thankfully, their seconds, who I'm so devastated to say I could not find any source that told me who their seconds were, they intervene and they put a duel to the end. They make them shake hands and they take them home to have their wounds cared for.
It's like, no, you shake his glove and you say good game.
We are going home. You need snack. Take your ball. Let's go. Gwinnett's wounds, excuse me. Mackintosh, he goes home. He makes a complete recovery. Gwinnett's wounds quickly turn gangrenous. And I would just like to take a moment right now to appreciate that it wasn't syphilis this time. He dies Monday morning, May 19th, leaving his widow and 3 daughters totally destitute.
Oh, now see, they're the real victims in this story.
Every one of them, absolutely. Like, at what point did she look at her husband and go, seriously? I should have listened to my mother. Like,
I mean, honestly, she probably said that many, many times.
oh, like my goal is to find more information about them. Like, what were their lives like after this? Now, the reason he's interesting, outside from his delightful, despite himself, he still manages to become a signer of the Declaration of Independence. His signature is the most valuable signature of all of the signers on the Declaration of Independence.
Because his creditors are still seeking it?
Probably. His signature sold on the auction block for $722,500. The reason his is so special is there are only 51 examples of his signature known to exist. Everybody else has bazillions, right? They all go
Right.
on to become lawyers or other politicians, and there's letters and there's other documentation with his signing on it. A comment from the Atlantic Journal-Constitution, the article I mentioned earlier that was written by Mr. Emerson in 2012, says, quote, "This particular signature is on a 1773 document relating to debts owed on Gwinnett's Georgia businesses. It's being sold as part of a full set of 56 signatures from the signers of the Declaration, called a Proctor Sang Newell collection. It is expected to fetch between 1.2 million and 1.5 million. The Gwinnett autograph alone will be worth more than half of that," said Livingston.
Now let's back up because you're not hanging that up to like show off a brilliant piece of painting. Or if you are hanging up that fact, a little bit of paper, it is literally the equivalent of like me hanging my student loan paperwork on the wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Your credit card statement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wild, right?
Like I get that some people have more money than sense, but like
He
why?
had no money and no sense.
And everybody after him is lusting after homeboy's scribbles.
And they freaking love him. Like, I cannot. When I learned about this character, I was like, that cannot be real. Like, as we're watching the episode, I was like, that name is totally made up. Like, that cannot be real. And immediately, the man was like, oh no, he's real, and he sends me this article. And I was like, that's nuts. But now, because his signature is so valuable, like, I need to know why. So we start to look into his life, and it is just one, like, one monumental failure after another, but at the same time, at first I was initially thinking this story is going to be so boring until I realized everything this man did, he somehow managed to get the people to love him, except for Macintosh, and give him more money, except for Macintosh, and then dies in a duel because he just can't aim.
Well, and it's because like Macintosh was the only one not swayed by his bullshit.
Absolutely. And I am
And he's like,
so here for it.
he's the one, like, you have that coworker that everybody loves, that this dude
Mm-hmm.
couldn't manage his way out of a paper bag. And at home, somebody ties this broski's shoes for him. And
Mm-hmm.
meanwhile, at work, it's like his shit doesn't stink. And that's what this guy is. Macintosh is like, I'm about to eat your lunch.
He's my favorite signer of the Declaration of Independence so far. I need to know about every single one of them.
Join
It
us
is
next
also
week.
worth saying he was the second to of the 56 signers to die. And interesting enough, his death was caused by internal political and personal feuding in Georgia and not because of the battle with Britain. Worth noting. I also learned because I read somewhere that he was the first one to die violently of the 56, and that led me to ask like, well, how many of them else
They all died
had
eventually,
violent ends?
Angie.
Eventually. No, I mean violent deaths. Like how many others died in duels, how many died in battle, blah blah blah.
Right.
While I couldn't give you an exact fact for that, I did learn that the last signer to die died 56 years after signing it, and he is the only known Catholic signer. His name was
Whoa.
Charles Carroll. Yeah,
Wow.
56 years. He died in 1832.
1832.
Yeah, 95 years old. So now that you have that, just
Wow.
remember, if Button Gwinnett can do it,
I mean, we just need to live our lives with the same audacity as Button Gwinnett.
mm-hmm,
And I should probably put less disdain on his name as when I say it too.
live your life. I'm not here to stop you. He is someone I really want to have a conversation with.
I would probably beat him to the bar stool. Like, I'm willing to bet that I'm Team Macintosh in this endeavor.
I told I told the man that I said, on this day last year, I told the story of Cassius Clay, and I am willing to bet he would have just put him out of his misery before he ever even had the chance.
Cassius would have been like, have you met my friend the Cannons?
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. So that's my thought it was going to be totally boring, turned out to entertain the living daylights out of me story of Button Gwinnett, the least successful signer of the Declaration of Independence.
Now I have to look up what story did I tell a year ago? Oh, so a year ago, that would have been you telling the story of Penelope Barker and the Edmonton Tea Party, and I told the story of Prince Didache Alamayehu.
You sure did. I'm looking at the
Oh,
list. Hmm.
yeah, because the 21st of January or of July, you said Cassius Clay, and I did a Nandi Josie.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Isn't
Sorry,
that
that was just
fun?
so exciting to like look back and be like, those are cool people.
And I love one of my favorite things about it is being able to like we are building a bar room full of people and how
Yeah.
they would interact with each other, and I just love that. Yeah,
Like I have a feeling my dude Captain Eric Moody, he'd be cool and low key with like everybody.
I think so. Yeah, and he'd be regaling them with stories about finding his way out of Badger's ass.
I mean, I mean he's just the
But
kind of low key can go on and be like, "Hey guys, all four engines have failed." You know,
mm, uh, needs my help. You know who Button Gwinnett reminds me of?
who?
Lord Dexter. But
Yeah,
like
honestly, I was thinking about that, but like Timothy Dexter kept falling up and like earning money, and
Yeah,
this
whereas
dude like was
cannot.
hemorrhaging it and like had the same
Mm-hmm.
like was successful on paper but had no money to his name.
Yep. But I mean, on the one side, Lord Dexter had a garden of statues, and Button had no garden.
Button didn't even have a pot to piss in.
Or probably any buttons by the time he died. I want so bad to know who their seconds were. Like, want to know. Internet, if you know, because I looked, and if I maybe I'm blind and I missed it, but like, please tell me.
Aaron Burr's like, I don't want my name attached to this. I'm going to reclaim this narrative. Like, I have been involved in some things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there you go.
Well, thank you.
You're
If you've
welcome.
enjoyed this story and you're like, good grief, I need more people named Button in my life or more planes flying through volcanoes, we are here for you. Just rate, review, subscribe, because those are the simple things that you can do that allow more unhinged humans to find us. And if you're thinking, you know what I need to do? I need to email these people and let them know exactly how to say that name of that place. It's unhinged.historypod@gmail.com. And as you're thinking about it, share us with your favorite airline captain or
Or financial
volcanologist.
advisor. Yeah, or
And on that note,
volcanologist.
goodbye.
Bye-bye.